Okay, so I'll get started with the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee, which is the same committee. And since we do have a quorum here, we'll get started with that, and we need to elect a chairperson for the Urban Renewal Agency. Yes.
Can we do a roll call first?
Okay, a roll call. Go ahead.
Jackie Kaufman,
Here.
Kim Bush. Here. David Robinson,
Here.
Ann Ellis,
Here.
Stu Strong,
Here.
Barry Brewster,
Here.
Stacy Keating. Here. Andrew Keating.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, so we need to elect a chairperson. So I'll let you guys throw it out there, and then you can take over the meeting. And I'm gonna Kim Bush.
I'll second that.
All right.
You did such a good job last time.
Oh, no,
You know how to do it.
I really don't, but I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out.
So no more nominations. Good, they're closed. Let the train go. And all in
Vice chair.
favor of Kim Bush for the chairperson, say aye.
Yeah.
Any opposed? All right, you got it. Your turn. Now you get to call
Okay,
for a vice
so
chair.
now we are electing a vice chair.
I nominate Barry Brewster.
I'll second that.
All right,
Just.
everybody,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
All right.
All right, do I present?
No, we do,
Oh,
but
well,
you'll
that's
just,
good.
we move us down.
All right, so we're moving on to the presentation of the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget message.
So this is gonna be your budget message for the urban renewal. So what you're passing out, this is the packet for. But if you will turn to the back, like 4 pages, we have the urban renewal budget in the back, 4 pages when you get it here. I'll let everybody get it and then.
Thank you. There. You said to the back,
Yeah, the back like 4 pages.
scratched by the pretty fix.
There you go.
Love our little town,
Me too.
right? Said at the beginning. Heard these things used to be horrible and now they're a lot better, so I'm happy.
All right, has everybody got it? All right, so. This is just such a small budget and it's, so we didn't prepare any big slides, shows or anything, so we're just gonna go through it. Fairly simple. On page 1, you have, all of us and the, who's on the budget committee, which is the same as budget committee for the city. Or for the city as well. Under the managers, lists all the management staff within the city and. As the urban renewal agency, I guess I would be director under that. On the next page, you see our urban renewal area, which is shaded in green, outlined in red. It's not the whole town, but it does include a lot of town and mostly within the business areas of town. And that's where we derive our income from, is the tax base within that area. So the urban renewal district was formed in August 25, 2021, so it was real new. As you can see through the message here, we reached out to the county assessor and it looks like the value this year is going to be right around $420,988 coming into the urban renewal agents or district. And that's calculated based on the county collecting 96% of their tax base, which is kind of like a state average in a way, so. Or no, I'm sorry, it's 421, 440, 429.88 was what was collected last year. My bad. We also collect SIP payments, which is the strategic investment plan payments. This is a agreement that was entered in with Georgia Pacific, and then it comes through them. And $85,000 will come into the Urban Renewal Agency through that as well. So basically, we have just under, or just over $500,000 coming in to the Urban Renewal Agency. As you see, when we go through the budget, we're gonna be, investing mainly in I&I and towards the public safety building. So those were identified in the Urban Renewal Agency plan. And so if we turn to the next page, you can see the final page, our budget. We have a beginning balance estimated to be about $286,000. And the current taxes that we forecast, given a total budget of $801,000. If you look at contracts and other services, that's lower because now that we have it going and up and going, really the only service we're gonna be paying out of there will be for the audit. And it's minimal, given the size of this. And then the state reporting that we have to do, our council helps us with that. So those are about the expenses, which will be around $5,000. And then we have an extra $5,000 in there if we have any legal fees that happen to come up or something like that. If you look at the I&I, that was identified in our plan, infiltration and what's the other word? Inflow and infiltration, sorry. So in our sewer system, and we're gonna put about 200,000 towards that through the Urban Renewal Agency. And then if you look to the public improvements, we are starting to build that up in accordance with the 5-year plan that was adopted last year by council. And that's gonna go towards, we have like sidewalks and those types of things identified. We're starting to build that fund for that. And then you have the transfer to the general fund, the 35,000 that we transfer, that's for administrative fees. That was identified in the plan that happens every year. And then if you look for the public safety remodel, $300,000 there to go over towards helping meet our budget there. So we're gonna continue the business loan program. We put 50,000 back in there. And so the budget balances, and that's where we're at. And that is all for the Urban Renewal Agency. And my thought is, because this is so short, we can discuss this one, ask questions and kind of get this out of the way, and then maybe take care of the final public comment on the 7th if we needed to. So Amanda, you have anything to add to it?
Oh, that's not it. There's not a whole lot to the. It's fairly newly formed. It was formed in 2021, so who are new to the committee. And so last fiscal year was the first time it really started collecting a whole lot, in the last 2 years, the last time it started collecting tax revenue, because we really just started to see revenues and expenditures coming through.
And if you, on the public safety building, why we're transferring that 300,000, that will finish out phase 1. We were about $300,000 short of finishing out phase 1, so that's why that will finish out phase 1 of the public safety building, which is what you see going on now with the siding, windows, roof, and doors that will be, and some seismic upgrades on the inside.
I was gonna, yeah, what about the
Yes.
foundation? Yeah,
There's gonna be there's a portion of the seismic to be taken care of in phase 1. And then in phase 2, there will be the rest of the seismic that happens plus some interior work. So I think this one has some big concrete pillars that will be going in that go from the basement all the way up through the roof in the new entryway that's being built. With that, questions on that budget? It's pretty straightforward.
Question about, I see the map on here, and as far as doing the business loans and such on there. It is just for the partials that are in green.
Yes,
Okay.
They must be located within the boundaries.
yes.
It's
The only,
only for businesses.
it's for businesses, within the URA or, yes. For facade of the businesses, for upgrades to the businesses, to remodeling of the businesses, or it can go if it will for the businesses, if they're creating housing within that as well. Go out here.
This is the business loan program. Really, the only change from last year, if you look at the previous adopted budget, the big change is we have additional funds built up now, so there's over 200,000 allocated for public improvements within the URA.
And I expect when the URA meets, we might start looking at our downtown sidewalks that was identified and trying to roll out a plan on that, on how we're gonna fix some of that.
And that would
those
be when
issues.
we replant the trees too.
That would probably involve some of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, in the past, they've used this funding to buy whole buildings and put in parking lots. Is that something that could happen with this money too?
I don't believe parking was identified in the URA,
It
so,
has to be what's like outlined in the plan.
yeah.
As far as buying whole buildings and stuff.
It could purchase buildings, renovate them to make them business ready and sell them or something along that line, or create like a business incubator or something along that. It does have that capability that was identified. But I don't think it's tearing them down.
I'm just thinking,
No.
our
Yeah.
sister city is planning on doing that.
Yeah, and I don't know what their URA states that they can do. Ours didn't have that. It did say we could purchase old blighted buildings and renovate them and resell them. That was identified.
I don't know if things have changed with, you guys being the new regime and all that. I know since I've been here, it's been said more than once that Toledo doesn't want to be a business, like we don't want to own businesses or homes or anything, and maybe that's changed, but
And
I don't wanna
I
be
think it's better to
landlords.
work with,
Yeah.
with people to renovate and not have the city in the business of real estate.
Yeah.
For per se, I don't agree with that, but I don't think they should be in the business of real estate.
yeah, that was what I had been told before.
There are cities that do it, but I don't know
We've been
that,
leaning away from that.
yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I think the city was looking at is addressing possible, this would be on the city side, I don't think the URA would apply here, but some workforce housing and looking at doing something there, but
Yeah.
that's statewide too. It's going
Right.
there.
Hey,
Late to the dance.
We are, where do we sit?
right up there, but you're here.
Right up there if you want.
Up there or down here, wherever you like.
We can bring those two chairs down here.
You can sit over here. I'm a perimeter house.
Oh, gosh.
Also on this side.
There you go.
There you go.
I like it cornered.
Brett, you have a good time.
Yes.
You already on back? We're already done?
No.
So-
We just did the URA first, since it was small.
These are-
Let me just note for the record that Tracy and John just.
Tracy and John are here.
Alright.
So
So,
we already went over the numbers, so I don't know if you want to look at it, but you're good at numbers and the stamp of approval before we move on.
We want to work backwards. Well,
I will say I like this format better than the big binders.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's still young and not a whole lot going on.
So do I need to call for a motion?
No,
We don't.
we can't have motion until we have public comment, and that will be on the 7th.
Okay.
So from now, we can just,
This is study time.
you can ask for public comment, and then if there's none, you can close this meeting and we can go to the next one.
Okay. Does anyone have public comments on the URA? If not, we can close this and move on to the next.
You to keep the same link going.
That's on each.
All right, so that at 6:20 or 6:18, we'll go ahead and call the next meeting to order for the City of Toledo Budget Committee meeting. And I'll go ahead and have Lisa take roll call.
Becky Kaufman,
Here.
Tracy Mix. Here. Kim Bush,
Here.
David Robinson,
Here.
Ann Ellis,
Here.
Steve Strong,
Here.
Barry Brewster,
Here.
Stacy Keating. Here. Andrew Keating,
Here.
John Mix. Thank you.
All right, so we'll note that there is a quorum present. With that, I'll take nominations for chairperson for the budget committee for the city.
I nominate Kim.
I'll second that.
Okay, here we go.
All right, so with that,
Anybody
any
against?
any other nominations? With that, we'll call a vote. All those in favor of Kim?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now you get to take over.
All right, we're nominating a vice chair.
Tracy.
Yay. I second it. Can I do that?
You can do that.
All right.
Call
Everybody,
for a vote.
call for a vote. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
There we go. Tracy's got it.
No, I've done that to her so many times. I knew it was.
I should have done it the other way around, not Kim.
It's okay, whatever.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
We'll explain as we get there.
Do I take one or are they? all?
No, that's yours.
Okay.
All right, we need to do meeting dates and times, and determine review and modifications. But I should have my glasses on. Am I doing that or are you doing that?
That's you.
Oh. All right, so, yeah, where
So
are we?
meetings are, the next meeting is May 7th and tentatively you have May 9th.
We usually don't need that, but we could.
We'll see.
As soon as I say that, yeah. All right, so the 7th and the 9th.
And are you guys still good starting at 6 or would you prefer 5:30 or I don't know?
6 is good.
Okay.
Time to get home and have dinner.
6 is certainly.
It was pretty early for us, but we'll make it.
And I believe generally in the past, the committee has kind of said they either only go 2 hours or 3 hours max, and then.
Oh, I remember that conversation, yeah, so. I believe in the past, we have said if it runs to 9. If that's pushing it and we want to cut off at 9 because everybody's kind of glazed over by that point. How do you guys feel? Do you want to just go to 8 and then go to another night? Do you want to push it to 9 if we look like we could finish? How do you? Does anybody have opinions?
I would like, in my mind, I would like to go to 9 or 8:30. If anybody else wants to go. Does anybody have young children here?
5-year-olds and 7-year-olds.
Okay.
But that's okay, my wife's home. So.
Okay. The reason being, I remember last year we did this pretty much all in one meeting.
Yeah.
And I am hopeful. And if not, then we'll know we can go into another meeting. I think that gives us, 3 hours. And that really lets us really get some meat into it.
it seems like if you do it too short, you really can't get into too much, and then you're pushing it over to another meeting, even maybe you don't need to. And that's just from my experience with this. So I would be comfortable going till 9. But whatever, as long as it's not going later than 9, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Hey, I can remember 11:30.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like last year we got to 9 and we only had like one section left and we took a vote and said, you guys are gonna finish this last section or do you want to go home? And you had the choice, so that's always an option too. Yeah. All right, so 9 o'clock.
Can find appropriate breaks in there.
And then review and modification procedures, what are those?
So tonight is, the plan was to present the budget to you guys, and from what we heard in the training, you guys want a week to kind of look it over after the budget message, but after we give the budget message, I mean, we're open to however you guys want to do it. If you want to start delving in, we can. Or you guys can take it home, absorb it, formulate your questions, and come back on the 7th. No matter what, we have to come back on the 7th because it was advertised for public comment on that night. So no matter what, we do have to come back that day, so. Or we can start and come do however you guys like, so.
What do you guys think?
Get started. We're here.
All right, is everybody in agreement that?
What, you want to start it tonight?
Presentations.
The presentations, yes.
Well, we can decide on next steps after we get to the presentations too. So.
So are you thinking more than just the budget message?
That would be up to you guys after the budget message. Because we probably got 3 hours of budget message. I'm just kidding.
But I figure.
That's never happened before.
Oh, no.
Okay,
Yeah, let's do the budget.
well, we'll go through that and see how we feel after the budget message. If you guys want to go from. So do you want to bring up the PowerPoint? So, for the city of Toledo fiscal year 24-25. So a little bit about our history, and you can follow along. I kind of follow along here in the book as well with my slideshows, and we'll get going there. But as you guys know, we were incorporated in 1905, and it's kind of a story how that was done, but it was, and that's what we've come to officially been incorporated in 1905. As you guys know, we're the furthest western end of the Portland Railroad. And we have the largest employer in Lincoln County with Georgia Pacific. And we're also served by a port of Toledo. So just a little bit about the city's history. If you look at our demographics, the next slide. Our population as given by the Portland State University is 3,549 this year. Average age in this town is about 42 years old. 89% is a high school graduate and 28 is bachelor's plus. We have about 52%, 53% of our citizens are employed. I don't have the elevation in there. I don't know why, but the average high temperature is 65 degrees, average low temperature. Annual rainfall average is 81 inches. The important thing to look at is our cost of living and way it's climbed, probably even since a lot of you guys have been on within the last couple of years. But the average house value, median house value is $338,000. Median rent is $983. So poverty level right now is 17.7%, and these are 2023 estimated numbers from the census. Number of housing units, approximately 1,665 units. We have about 48% of our population renting in this town. So
Does housing units include rentals and?
yes, so a family unit. Yep. And the average household size in town is about 2.6 people, so. Land use, we have about 2.41 square miles. That hasn't changed since last year because we haven't annexed anything else in. We have about 35% is commercial, 48% residential. Public land is less than 10%, and other land, like that's your like wetlands and those types of things, about 6.5%. So not a lot on the demographics except for that you can see average median household income 46,000. So that which seems low in housing value. So, go ahead, next slide. So the mission of the sent forward from the Toledo City Council, which is mission of the Toledo City government, is to provide efficient and necessary public service that protect and enhance the quality of life in Toledo now and in the future, as determined by our citizens, the law, and available economic resources. So just develop, when we develop our budget and our goals, it all centers around the mission statement. So with that, what were the council's goals? So we had our goal planning session in January, late January, early February. And these were the goals that came up for this fiscal year. To enhance and sustain public infrastructure and facilities by implementing plans for parks, stormwater, street improvements, upgrading water lines, improving fire infrastructure, and evaluating the city fleet in order to create safe, efficient, and sustainable environment for residents and visitors. We're going to focus on advancing technology while simultaneously implementing measures to ensure security and redundancy. To sustain and expand an inclusive and welcoming work environment, focus on enhancing retention rates, enhancing civic engagement and transparency by implementing a comprehensive community outreach program, fostering communication, education about government, and involving community members in decision-making processes to achieve effective local governments. This is one of those types of meetings right here. Improve emergency preparedness. We're going to try to upgrade or update our emergency operations plan by the end of this fiscal year. It's something that should be looked at every year and probably upgraded every 3 years. And is the general thought on that. And it's been a few years since ours been really gone through. Encourage economic development by developing barrier reducing policies and plans to attract business investment. Getting grants for commercial rehabilitation and supporting housing and development. So this budget that you're going to see, and when you see the CIPs, a lot of those CIPs are going to have a council goal tied to them. You should see that. You're going to see in our budget where we've tried to address every one of these issues. And hopefully we have to point that out to you that it hits or a mark on the council goal. How is Toledo organized? So first and foremost, answer to our citizens. Citizens answer to, or the council answers to them. Council government, you have they appoint the city manager, the city attorney, and the municipal judge. You see the little line going over from the city attorney there. That's planning. He also oversees the planning department. We have a contract planner, so when our contract planner is not here, the attorney also fills in that role. And then Public Works works closely with the planning department as well. So you got that little dotted line there. The municipal judge oversees the municipal court, and our finance manager and assistant city manager also oversees the court as we provide the labor that offsets and helps out in the court for the clerking and that type of stuff. And then you see our general, the only other thing to point out is emergency management is shared with fire, police, and public works. They're our emergency responders for our disasters and anything that goes on. And it's important those three work together in developing, and they'll be instrumental in working in our emergency preparedness plan and updates in that. So that's kind of how it seems. You see the police department oversees both patrol, community service, which is our community service officer, and our dispatch center. And then Public Works has wastewater, water, and maintenance. Fire is fire, the library is library, and human, you're gonna see in this budget, we are asking in this budget for a human resource officer. And so we're gonna place that under the finance department because we believe that the human resource and the finance go hand in hand a lot in what they do. And I didn't think we needed another department head. So that's why we're kind of putting it together. Okay, next slide.
Actually, no, can I say-
Sure,
Back there,
go back one. Yep.
you have a line between city recorder and city council.
Yes, so our city recorder, the dotted line there, she handles a lot of the communication for the council in getting out their message and lining up the meetings. She's recording your, meeting, she's doing all that. So she has some direct activity with the city council, and that's what that reflects in that way.
I would, good, thank you for explaining that.
Mhm. Okay, so our annual budget this year, $26,702,905. Up 2.3% from last year. That's not huge. That also, well, I'll get to that next slide. It also has full-time equivalents of 47.3 FTE. So we're still under that 50 mark, which is important. And that comes in, I think last year was 48 FTE, if I remember right. So we did do some work on combining and pulling some things together, and that's where we come up with the 47.3.
Why do we want to be under 50?
So when you get to 50, you get to FIMLA. Yeah, and that gets in a whole new set of issues of.
There's a
And
couple of things that
costs.
come into play, both
Yes.
FEMLA, but also the Affordable Care Act, where, and there's a lot of healthcare benefits we're required to, it makes us something called an applicable large employer. If you have 50 or more equivalent full-time employees, you're an applicable large employer, and there's a whole nother set of benefits you're required to provide anyone who works for you 90 days or longer. It becomes much more expensive.
Want to keep it under 50?
Yes, we want to
Okay.
keep it under.
Yes.
No.
That's why, yeah, that's why we're currently looking at our system where we can keep it. So we got to keep it somewhat stable. So. All right. So budget highlights. You're gonna see in the budget, we account for approximately 10% increase to property insurance. Account for, by the bargaining agreement, there's a 4% COLA for the TPSA. And we threw in 4% on management. That's still to be decided for council, but it's budgeted for up to that. And then the TEA, we are still under negotiations. We put in an estimate of where we believe we're gonna come out. I think we're pretty close because we're within dollars of where we want to be. So it's close. If for some reason it falls through, we may be coming back if we get outside where we believe we're going to budget, but we believe we've budgeted for that. So approximately 10% increase calculated for health insurance. This is what was given to us by CIS. And then SAFE, our workman's comp they said 7 to 10%. So I think we put about 10% in. We haven't still got their numbers back yet on that. So, but we're planning, our agent told us 7 to 10% what they're hearing. Department requested capital improvement projects, have all been accounted for. So all of the ones that you heard during the goal setting sessions, they've all been accounted for. We did make a couple minor deductions, which I've talked to those department heads that it affects. And I think the deductions we made are limited. So and things could turn a little different if bids come in a little different and things like that. So there was only 2 departments that affected. And but other than that, every CIP was accounted for in this budget. Water and sewer revenue is not keeping up with costs. We accounted for a standard 3% increase, which by ordinance we do. And looks at, or not by ordinance, by resolution, sorry, and that will be coming up in May. We just planned on 3%. I know, talking to the finance director and myself, we're definitely gonna have to take a sharp look on those, because especially we probably spent, those are small budgets, but we spent a lot of time going back and forth on those, trying to get those to work. So that's something we're gonna have to watch going forward. We also got direct pass-through from the state legislature for 640,000 for the Olala Meadows, which is the apartment, low-income apartment buildings that will be going out on Sturtevant. So that's accounted for into the budget as well. So, those are the highlights, and that's what you're gonna hear from us. From here, I'm gonna turn it over to our finance manager, and she's gonna talk to you about the general fund. And then you're gonna see how we lined up the budget, because it's gonna be different than what you've seen in years past. We hope that it's gonna be more transparent, more intuitive and easier to follow. But you got these packets that you see here that she just passed out. This is showing you the background information and why, and it'll probably make sense
Oh my God, I love you.
why we reduce things. So with that, I'm gonna turn off to the Assistant City Manager and Finance Director, Amanda Carey.
Like the bell. First, just a quick breakdown. These graphs are included in the budget as well. We included them here for your review and the presentation. This is just an overview of our general fund revenue. You can see that 37% of the revenues received by the general funds come from our taxes. That's our primary revenue source for general funding. Next, we have some transfers, quite a bit of transfers this year. There was quite a bit of funds that had been transferred to reserves, things like that, that we went ahead and moved back to general fund, and we can get into that as we go through the budget. Franchise fees, 17%, state shared revenues are another large piece, and then it gets down into the smaller portions. We have utility fees, intergovernmental revenues, and then just other miscellaneous all pieces of the pie, and you can see the breakdown in the budget itself, the revenue is all listed. And here we have the general fund expenditures. So primarily out of the general fund, our biggest expense is personnel costs. Personnel costs include salaries, benefits, so this is everything we have to pay for retirement, for healthcare, workers' comp, social security, all of that is included there. Materials and services are the next big piece of that pie, and then we have just a small percent in our general fund dedicated to capital outlay, few transfers, special payments, no debt service currently out of the general fund, and a little bit in contingencies and unappropriated.
And I was just gonna address that, if you know, as we go through, you will see that the majority of our capital outlay is handled through our reserves. So that's why you don't see a huge capital outlay within the general budget, because we transferred those into reserves. And that's where we are running most of our capital outlay.
Budget changes. Like Doug started to explain, what I want to go over with you this evening. I've done quite a bit of work to try to streamline our budget. There's a lot going on, it's very busy, and there was a lot of redundancies, particularly in the general fund. We had two sections, two departments, so to speak, one labeled administrative services and general services, with a lot of similar lines. So we're budgeting twice in the same fund for the same things and splitting it out. It causes confusion, inconsistency when we're paying for things, so it's actually harder to track what we're spending year over year. I've pointed out a couple here. We have, in administrative and general, we have memberships and subscriptions in both, supplies, and so it's just a lot going on and I was trying to clean some of those type of things up. So these two are some of the biggest changes you're gonna see. Next slide, please. Some of the items, the line items that were listed in general services, I went ahead and moved over to administrative services. So our data processing support, that would be our software, that type of thing. Insurance, this is all administrative expenses. There's no reason to section them off in two areas. Streetlights, that's just another utility electric payment. There's no reason that needs to be separate. So those type of items all got pulled out of general services and moved, either combined if they had the same line or moved into administrative. Next slide. So in administrative services, you can see where I've added where there wasn't a line, where I have the arrow at the top there for data processing support. That had previously been in general services, it's now in administrative services, just to combine those, streamline. So the history is not gonna be there for the previous 3 years, but it's currently budgeted for the new fiscal year. Same with insurance, streetlights, just kind of try to explain the difference there. And part of what you have, what I handed out right here, is supplementary information. This is to give you the background to accompany the budget you're looking at. So the budget has all of the revisions included in what was presented, but I also provided the full breakout of every previous budget, so you can see all of the background that went into that. And then there are areas, if we go to the next slide, please. So this is a quick overview, administrative services and general services. This is what it looks like after those changes, just kind of cleaned it up. And now administrative services covers all of the basics, the costs of running the city, the office supplies, the insurance, the utility bills, advertising costs, travel and training, subscriptions, contracts and services, all those type of expenditures that are typically found in an administrative budget. And general services has been left to be primarily for the council and the committee, which were, most of those expenses were, but now we have added line items for council budget specifically, so we can identify those more easily. Next slide.
If you also look, they put in that community programs section in there too, which we talked about, lines with our goal
Get
setting.
into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So the next piece I would explain that's going to be included in your supplementary information, you'll have a page for each budget page that was revised. And then you'll have an accompanying page that says, like, for example, on the top, like this is revenue lines. So the second page is revenue lines combined. So anywhere where I rolled lines together, where there was redundancy, I provided you the breakdown so you can see what makes up that total. So you have all of the background of what goes into those numbers. So this here on the screen is the example. The old layout, this is for one of our departments. We had separate line items for electricity, phones, gas, and then streetlights were broken out from the electric bills. Go ahead.
Yeah, one question, just, was the rationale for, say, streetlights or for the utilities being broken out this way because of the revenue aspect of collecting street light maintenance fees?
They really don't go hand in hand.
Okay.
I mean, you could see what we're collecting versus what we're paying, but what we pay for our electric costs is different than the fees that we charge
Okay.
to maintain our street lighting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, the separation, there didn't seem to be a lot of reason behind it. It seemed like it had just been added to over the years.
No, that's not true. So on the streetlights, if I recall correctly, we've been finagling around with that one a little bit. It was originally on the water bill and we had temporarily taken some of that fee and put it into the sewer. And so I'm a little confused about why you moved it.
This is expenditures.
Yes, I know that. So it seemed like if the fee went in one, it should come out the other one, but I'll have to look at. So
That's
you're
kind- that's
taking
kind
it
of-
out of the general fund and you're putting it into an administrative on the streetlights, correct?
Those are all general fund though.
So the general fund has both.
These are all general fund.
And general services. We moved it from general services into administrative.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
This is all still in the general fund. It was just they were split in two places.
But can say streetlight utility fees,
That's-
revenue be utilized toward other utilities
This is
as an
expenditure.
expenditure?
This
So
is an expenditure, not a revenue. To be clear.
So what you're asking is if if the streetlights comes into the general fund, the money goes into the general fund as income. Then yes, that money in the general fund can be used to pay the expenditures of any of the utilities. It's
Yes.
not limited to just
that's what I was
streetlights.
curious about. And that's why I was kind of wondering if
I get
streetlights was its own category in expenditures
Oh,
to correlate with the fees that were being collected.
okay, I see what you're
But, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the numbers are so similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we still have the breakout. Really, it's just for our purposes for the tool, trying to streamline some of this. And streetlights is only one, thing. This is just an example. Some of these, for example, in almost every fund, not every fund. We had separate line items for vehicle maintenance, gas, oil, and tires. Those have now been combined just into vehicle maintenance. We don't need two lines because it was very cluttered. There's a lot going on and it's busy and it just makes it kind of hard to read and hard to see what we're spending. So you can see it's just combined just for clarity, but we still have the breakdown. If that makes sense. Next slide. Same thing with personnel. This is an example. A lot of the salaries for the city are broken out, spread across the different funds because we all work for the city and we administer all of the different areas. So for example, this is a snippet from the streets fund. The streets fund covers 0.02 of the city manager's salary, 0.05 of that's the old budget, the assistant city manager HR position, public works director 0.3, finance director 0.04, et cetera, all the way down. So it does provide the breakdown, but it's very difficult to get a clear picture of what we're, at a glance, what we're spending in salary. And it also just makes the whole budget very busy. It's almost hard to read with so much going on. And same for the benefits, if you can see at the bottom of this box here. Social security, health insurance, workers' comp, retirement, each their own line item. Typically what you see is just benefits. So those have been combined in all of the funds, so you can get a clear snapshot. We still have the equivalent, how many employees total positions are being supported in each department. So personnel 4.41 on the right, and we have a line item for salaries, the total amount that is being covered for those positions. We still have the line item for call time and overtime, and then benefits is one total. So, and again, for each of these, you have the breakout of what goes into that. And we have the full version as well.
So are all the breakouts for those gonna be a part, I mean, so you're reducing it down to the new layout and getting rid of all the detail.
Yes.
So that's making this less transparent. Well,
That depends on how you're looking at it. I mean, I know what you're saying. However, when a lot of people look at it and they say, well, how much are you spending on salary? Is this what you're saying? We do have the backup information that says, if somebody asks, well, how much of that is for the city manager? It's easy to pull that spreadsheet and say, well, this much. But
what's the manager's salary broken out?
We still have all of that and can provide all of that.
Is that gonna be, no, I'm not asking, is it gonna be part of the budget somewhere? Is it there gonna be that breakdown somewhere? Or are people if somebody from our town says, okay, I wanna know what this line item for benefits mean, do they have to come to the city hall and ask the city recorder for a breakdown of that? Well, that's not being transparent then. And we have an obligation to be transparent, so expect me to give you a little grief on that one.
Okay, I'm open to that. I think it still shows all the salaries and we easily can provide any further explanation. We have it both ways. It's just kind of difficult to read when it's.
Is it
So
going
much
to be
going on.
presented next year with this little addendum? So you'll have on the right-hand side, you have the new layout. But this is the old layout with the numbers and the allocations are going to be available.
Yes, and we have it both. They still all go into their separate GLs. We have everything completely broken down.
It's just for the simplicity of putting the budget together. It puts it this way, but the background is all there. And like you said, yes, if somebody came and requested it, it's a matter of just printing a sheet and handing it to them and saying, here's the breakdown.
I'd also argue transparency goes both ways to some extent too, that with a more complex document, it's often harder to see some of the
Yeah.
kind of core changes. So for instance, when we think about like personnel services, let's say we stayed at 47.5 or 47.5 FTE, but the allocations of that change by 0.25 for one person, 0.75 for another based on availability, based on the needs of the city as they change year over year. If you're getting that full complex breakdown, those changes are not going to be as easy to find, not as identifiable. It might look like things are changing that aren't really changing, and that kind of snapshot might be the more easy to understand, easy to digest kind of transparency.
Well, what that tells me, okay, so if I'm a citizen, which I am, and I'm looking at two budgets, we used to have the details so people could go and say, okay, how much is the city spending on this and this and this approximately? Now it's like, well, it's none of your business. And we have worked so hard.
See the budget.
We have worked so hard
And request
the
it.
last years that I've been involved in this to
No,
get
you
that
get it on.
transparency.
We can publish that as well, though. I mean, the goal.
I think
is
you
to
should.
hide it.
Yeah, I would like to see both.
Do that.
I'm not saying do away with this. I'm saying I would like to see the details somewhere too.
Okay.
And that's all I'm saying.
agree.
I like this part too. I like the summary, but I think we need the detail somewhere too. And that's all I'm
To
saying.
do that, we can do that. It's
I
just.
think we do both. It's great.
Have it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at here.
Absolutely, yeah.
What I'm looking at here is the breakdown.
The goal
If I
is
could-
for ease of.
I just think,
readability.
I think that the new layout is good, but I do agree with Tracy that the breakdown should be publicly available for.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I
Yeah, and
Because
we
we
have
have
it
a lot of
readily
people that will go through
Mhm.
at home privately and tear this up.
Yes.
And if you're not giving them that, and all you're giving them is that, that seems exactly what Tracy was saying, like, nah, you don't get to know anymore. And that will aggravate a lot of people.
And I can
So-
tell you, if you look on page 13. That shows you the breakdown of the categories for each of the FTEs. So page 13. couple with that.
I like.
So it shows you exactly like if you look at the city manager. 0.01, 0.01, 0.01, how it comes out of the budget and 0.94 out of administration or whatever it is. That's showing exactly who comes out of what budget. So if you go to if you're here in the streets budget and you look at that salary line item. And then you come over here to the streets budget, which is under gas tax under here. You'll see who all's taking money and at what percentage is their money out of there. So it's there, it's just in a different form. It's all there.
It's not in a form that people understand though. They understand that.
Tax you.
I
understand these.
I understand. And yeah, some people can see it both ways.
That's the streets.
I just feel if we're gonna summarize that stuff that much, we need to have the detail too.
My
It's not-
question is, how accurate is that? Is that just arbitrary numbers that somebody's taken down? Well, you'll probably spend about 0.02% of hours in that. I mean,
No, it's actually,
That's
how the payroll is spread across the general ledger. That's actual percentages of their salary.
Yes.
How it's.
I know a percentage of their salary, but how accurate? I mean, do you spend that much time on street funds? Or do you spend less time or more time? I mean, is it an arbitrary number? If it's just an arbitrary number, then it doesn't really matter what they are because we can put anything in there. We can say he spends 50% of his time on street funds.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but that's not what I'm having a hang up.
We're just allocating, we're
No, no.
saying we're just allocating a fund arbitrarily
Okay, I know what you're saying.
One,
I don't care about the percentage of the people. That's not what I'm caring about, and most people don't. What I'm looking at is all of a sudden we have social security, health insurance, workers' comp, retirement, half of which are not actually benefits. They're stuff that people paid into, or
Those are fringe benefits.
payroll taxes are not fringe benefits. I'm sorry, you can call them that, but they're not. They're not. They're a legal obligation of the
They
city.
are, they
Okay,
are.
they're not a benefit.
Part
They're a
of-
legal requirement. It's not a benefit. Call it that, it's not. Legally, it's not. So, and I'm gonna get hung up on the legal issues, because that's what I do for a living. All right, and I know so do you. But now we're telling people that these are benefits. We're gonna see $158,000 of benefits on these salaries, and people are going, why are they getting so many benefits? They're not gonna understand that's payroll taxes, workers' compensation. They're gonna think they're all getting, all these benefits. So it doesn't actually define it and show it in a way that people can see it. They need to see the social security, the health insurance, the workers' comp, the retirement. And because calling it benefits mislabels it. They're not benefits. So that's what I have a problem with, the fact that it's not labeled correctly. I mean, in your mind it is, from my mind, it's not. Because, pay that they're not legally, and so people are gonna look at that and go, whoa. And I would too. And that's my first reaction to that is, we're paying $158,000 of benefits on $281,000 of salaries. Something's wrong. I'm gonna go work for the city right now. Whereas that's not what it is. It's the retirement, which is a benefit, I guess, but the workers' comp, the social security, those things are not, you're grouping them all together and it's misconstruing that label. That's why I wanna see the detail.
And that's absolutely easy to do. We have it available. I'm not trying to take anything away.
No,
It's
I
more for
understand.
our use.
But this budget is supposed to not be just for our youth, it's supposed to be for people to look and see
We have both
transparency.
versions. We have both. Really, the goal was to kind of declutter. It's just breaking out. I mean, I'm not against providing as much information as possible. Just sometimes when there's so much going on, it's hard to get a sense of the story, of the picture of what's happening because it's so busy. That was the only thought there.
Is there an opportunity, like year over year? If based on feedback from the public, if there was a need to adjust or provide greater detail? Go back to the bigger book.
Oh, absolutely. We have it still. Yeah, we have both.
I can tell you a supplement, we can easily add
We can have both pages.
add to the page that talks about the breakdown of that line item. It's not a problem. It can be done. And it's easily done and added and can be tracked. It's not. I guess what we're showing here is how we broke it down and this is how we put it in there. Easily put the back data on the back of the page, or you know what I'm saying? Like on the back of it that says, this is a breakdown of payroll. This is the breakdown of benefits, and
That
it's
would be-
easy to do.
That would be good.
I think that would be ideal.
Yes.
We can do that.
And it basically will break down so that those numbers, how we got the number that went up into salary line item or the number that went into benefits. That's easy to do.
Well, see, in that way it would separate those right back out.
But what we're trying to say is
Easily.
when we're presenting this budget to you guys, is we presented to you the simplistic form. But if you want that data, we have it, and that's what you have in I don't know if they're these supplements, but
Yes.
we do have the supplements to show what those breakdowns are for you guys, and we can easily put that into this budget as well.
We can do
Make
that.
a lot of people.
Yeah. Next slide. This is just an example. This is what we were going for, because the pages again are so busy. There's a lot of different budget pages in the city's budget and there's a lot of line items in each one and it does make it a little bit hard to read, a little bit hard to understand sometimes. And the idea was to kind of make it a little more understandable and readable for anyone. So this is the police budget, which isn't even a overly complex budget. This is the same budget in the old layout. And then the next slide, please. And then this is the new simplified presentation. This just kind of cleans it up, less lines, same information, but just makes it a little bit easier to look at a glance without so much going on, was the idea. So we have the same categories, personnel expenditures up at the top, the salaries, the overtime, grant overtime benefits. We have materials and services, and some of those lines have been combined, like vehicle maintenance. It's no longer separated out with gas, oil, and tires, for example. We don't need two line items. We get a full sense of what we're spending to maintain our vehicles for the police. And then capital outlay and transfers. So it's the same information, just combining some of that, get rid of a lot of the clutter so you can kind of read it easier. That was the idea. And this is all in front of you. This is just up here for you to get a glance. So that's a little explanation about some of the changes, trying to just clean up what we're looking at a little bit. And then I want to talk about the numbers. So there's a few things just to focus on here. First page in our revenue, not a whole lot different. There are a couple of items that are going down a little bit, a little different. Our television franchise, our garbage franchise, and our electric franchise have all been trending down. We collected less than, and in some cases, like the garbage franchise, quite a bit less than what we budgeted for last year. So I did have to reduce those budgets. It's like, those are good. Going down and hopefully won't continue to go down so sharply, but they are going down. What's the reason? Some of them, they're just not close.
Television.
The television.
More and more people are unhooking from television.
So we're not getting all the cable revenue. Garbage, I think we might have kind of peaked with well, Juno's not the biggest piece of it, but that has been, our payments have been trending down. I did talk to a couple folks at Doll. They said, it really depends on the materials they're collecting. This last couple of quarters revenue we've received has just been lower, so we went ahead and lowered our estimates. When we put together these budgets, we always try and budget conservatively. So for revenues, we will always try to budget a little on the low side just to be safe. And if we collect more, that's fantastic. But we don't want to way over budget what we think we're going to get for this.
Is that because their expenses are going up or because I'm paying more every single time on all those. I pay more this year than I did last year. So they're making more money, but they're not giving you more money, they're giving you less money. So.
Well, what happened is your neighbor got tired of paying more and he disconnected. So you get to pay more for him, but we're still getting less.
Yeah.
Right, but like garbage, everybody uses garbage, everybody uses electricity. I use garbage, even if I take it to the dump.
You're right. I guess if we call
still-
it the dumper still.
Yeah, I'm still
Yeah, you're
paying
right.
more than I was before, and electricity, I'm paying more now than I was before. So they're making more money.
And electric also goes a lot on weather,
It's very dependent.
what
on
our weather is doing.
Right.
So this year was warmer, so we saw revenues down.
Gotcha.
If it's a colder year, our revenues will
So it's
come.
based on use, not amount that they get.
Yeah.
Okay.
We receive a percentage of the revenue that they collect. So when they
Okay.
collect less, it impacts our franchise.
Okay.
Good for our monthly budget.
Electric is negligible compared to garbage.
Right.
But garbage, I agree with you, Larry, that's a,
Yeah,
that's a hard one for me too, to fully comprehend such a dramatic drop.
Well, and Judy had shared with me, the previous finance director before she left, she hesitated on budgeting, bringing up the budget for garbage franchise she didn't know how long the Juno project and some of the stuff going on with Doll would continue. She finally did budget for it, bring it up. And it looks like it's still high, but we're dropping a little.
And Juno's starting to bring in from outside sources too, so Doll's getting less and less coming through, so that affects that as well.
Do you think the electric franchise fees, the amount that you have budgeted is going to be a little bit high based on what we brought in last year? Or do you think they've raised the rates enough that it's going to make up that gap?
I am expecting electric, gas utilities, all of those, we are seeing big increases in those fields. I'm seeing 5, 7, 9% rate increases, so I do believe that that will be a safe bet. Yeah, yeah. And then, the only other real difference down at the bottom there, we did do, like I mentioned, and we'll see them kind of in our reserves, we did transfer quite a bit more back to the general fund. Some of that, I don't know if you can read the screen very well, but again, you have it in your packet. Transfer from grants fund, I'll go over that one, but we had transferred quite a bit of money into the grants fund, we're moving it back. Just some things like that, the strategic reserve, that was the SIP money that the city collected, left some for the city council reserve and then put the rest back to the city. Same for some of the others, we'll get into those, but nothing remarkable in the revenue. Remarkable difference. In administration. Couple of items to go over.
Read it. You didn't want me to read anymore. It's still annoying me. She hasn't changed it yet.
So, and in every fund for salaries, I always kind of budget a little high just to give us that room to be safe. You never know when somebody's gonna leave and cash out all their vacation time, or we have to pay someone out, or, you know, there's different scenarios that it can impact salaries, so we need to leave ourselves extra room on top of that estimated COLA, and particularly fund by fund, it's going to vary. Some of them were budgeted closer than others as we go through. Administration is quite a bit different because we have personnel changes. In past years, we had our previous city manager was also filling the role of the finance director, and now we have a city manager and an assistant city manager finance director. And then we've also budgeted for a human resources specialist. So that's another additional staff person in that department. So just a few changes that are increasing that number, but it's more positions. And in turn, wherever you see those, the benefit costs increase as well. That's more that we're paying into retirement, more payroll taxes, more all of that.
And this also assumes that they're filled 100% of the time, and that's not generally the case.
Yeah, we very typically, I would predict we will come in much lower than that, but that's just having all of those positions for the whole year.
Maybe something that will make me less annoying. And I know this isn't based on my feelings, but can we change the term benefits to taxes, insurance, and benefits?
Yeah.
That would make me feel better.
Okay. Fair enough.
I would feel better.
That's a great compromise.
I can easily do that. Taxes, insurance.
Yeah, because I think that's okay. Otherwise, you know, I've said how I feel. I know what it looks like. I want to go to work for the city right now.
Right, and public perception is very important. I always try to be mindful of
Yes,
that,
yeah.
so I appreciate that. Yes.
You don't want me to work here. Nobody wants me to work here.
Some of the bigger increases are just moving things around. It's particularly administrative in general. Those ones are gonna look a little funky just because of all of the movement. Some of the larger increases, we did beef up the travel and training budget this year. Last year, it was not even close. And we have quite a few staff members who that covers, our city attorney getting his continuing education credits, all kinds of things that go into that. So we budgeted accordingly to cover those expenditures. Membership and subscriptions looks a little high, but again, that's a combination from what was budgeted in the general category and administrative. So it was redundant, and those have just been combined. Special purchases, same thing, and then contracts and other services, we had it in a couple of places. We're combining those, just cleaning it up one line item, so then we can see what we're paying year over year, and it's not spread out and kind of misleading. This one's tiny. Some of these are, I apologize. That's actually why I sat down here so I could try and read them. So general services, at the very top there, this is the budget that we combined with, or moved things around with admin. It was kind of funky in previous years. We had a percentage of one staff person, our IT person. was the only one, for some reason, that was putting this, not admin. Combined him with admin like everybody else. Let's see, again. The main changes in materials and services here, the big differences are, trying to read, all of these lines. These are now. You double check.
The first one
Yes.
is membership. and
Membership and
subscription.
subscriptions. These are all now the council's budget lines. So what I've done is there were some commissions and committees and council items in that. So I just went ahead and made that the council and committee budget. So there are line items for planning commission, for safety committee, that kind of thing. But then we also have specific line items for the city council's budget. So the membership and subscriptions is now only for council. The advertising, that's council's budget. The city council, you've got that 10,000 that we talked about for some of the events. We've got travel and training, that is city council's travel and training budget. Community programs, special purchases and supplies. That's all for council's expenditures, so that we can easily identify those. We know how much money we have available. We can read. This is one of our reserve funds. The city council strategic reserve fund. I just wanted to go over a couple of items in here. In the revenue section, the refunds and miscellaneous, we have the SIP money. That's what that 487,000 is. So it is an increase from last year. And then the other item up in revenue, the direct funding, that's the funding for the Alala Meadows that Doug had mentioned earlier. That's gonna be a pass-through we're receiving. And in materials and services, we got rid of the that BlackBerry. Just pointing that
BlackBerry.
out. Yep, the BlackBerry 95,000 went away.
On that, if you guys remember, I'll touch on that real quick. So council passed that they were gonna transfer out of this strategic fund to pay for the SDCs for BlackBerry. City attorney did research, and if your new housing subsidies that you're putting in is for low income, and at least 80% of it is low income, you are allowed to waive SDCs, and you can do it, because otherwise you can't waive, by law, you cannot waive SDCs. But if it's for a housing project that is by ordinance, I can't remember the ordinance number off the top of my head, but by ordinance, or not ordinance, by ORS, sorry. If it's for housing that has at least 80% low income, you can actually waive SDCs rather than transfer the funds. So it was able for us then to put that 95,000 back in to the fund rather than have to move money to the SDC fund.
So now I have a question.
Mhm.
There was a reason we did it the way we did it. We did it that way because we wanted to make sure that if they turned around and changed the use of that, if all of a sudden they made it not for low income housing, that the city would, or if they sold it, then the city would be able to collect those SDCs. So by waiving them, we're not gonna be able to do that if all of a sudden tomorrow they decide, it's not gonna be low income.
And their funding, they have to sign, I believe it's a 10-year contract for low income housing on that as well.
So they're,
Funding
so they're locked into that someplace else then.
through their
I think
funding.
their funding is a 30-year commitment.
Was it 30? I'm
Is
sorry.
it?
It's 30.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, Mike Adams looked into.
okay, well then that's good to know, because I don't think we knew that at the time when we were doing that.
And we will still restrict, we're gonna still restrict them anyway. Even if we're waiving it, I think we can record some kind of instrument to run with the land that restricts them from changing the use from low income.
And we control the lease on that land as well, so there's some restriction there that we
Okay.
can put on that. lease.
No, that Alola is where we control the lease, and this is Blackberry.
Not BlackBerry, you're correct. I'm sorry, my bad.
But no, at the time, the SDC statutes say you can't waive SDC fees. But some of the new housing bills in the low income housing statutes that came out of some of the new bills allow you to waive partially or completely the SDC fees for low income housing.
My question is that oftentimes construction projects take multiple years, and so would string into next fiscal year budget. Should we keep the SDCs in this budget as a line item because of long-term construction?
Well, actually, the transfer happened last year.
Mhm.
We have transferred 95,000 already into the SDCs. So we'll have.
Did we make the transfer
We
already?
already made the
Yeah.
transfer.
So
So we eliminated that line item here. but then
because we
we'll
were
have to-
preparing for Olala, that we would be probably doing the same type of situation there. So we just didn't budget for it, knowing that our council will probably
So
choose.
yeah, it's already been
Waive.
moved into the SDCs because nothing has been waived or done yet.
Okay.
And then we'll address that when that decision is made.
Yeah.
All right.
Special purchases, can I ask why that's so high?
That's your guys' thing to play with. That's generally what we've been using for emergencies.
I just
So
wondered.
like the ice storm, we use that line item to help offset some of our emergency stuff.
Then you just have the Lala Meadows pass through and then the transfers.
I wasn't here when COVID started, but I remember Mayor Cross talking about they had set aside extra money for emergencies, and he said, thank God they did because it got Toledo through the first parts of COVID. Is that where that lives? Would that have been?
I don't know at the time that I was, that's where we live it now, is because that way, we've housed it there, so the council has that emergency funding of it.
Rather have it there and not use it than not have it.
I was just curious, so it's just coming from a funding sources and it's
Yeah.
just being placed there, so that makes sense, that's fine.
Okay, next slide. The grants fund, we're making some changes here. I'm actually trying to move away from using this fund. It's been kind of funny. We have a special separate reserve. It's its own standalone fund. And there were some grants in it, but it wasn't really being used consistently. When I came on, I was shown, and what we were doing was to adjust each individual department's budget for any grants received. They weren't going into the grants fund, and I do believe one of the things Doug and I have talked about, probably the reason for that is if we get large grants, it's 10% or 15% now, I am getting those mixed up in my head, of the budget, then we have to do a supplemental budget and go back to the budget committee. And so if we got a very large grant, we would have to do a supplemental budget each time, so it doesn't really make sense to put it in its own fund. So we're working on just moving away from this. We did leave, there was a beginning balance of about $500,000. We have been allocating some more interest here. I assume for matching funds for some of those grants, we're just gonna stop allocating interest. We didn't budget for any new grants coming in this year. There was a little bit of money left over. We left where we had some for the safe routes that we're working on for ODOT, the Petroleum Trust. And there's a little bit of Art Toledo and some there that we just need to expend, but we're not putting anything new in there.
So, the interest was actually the income on the money that was sitting in that fund, so it was the interest income earned. So unless there's no money in that account, or in, in those accounts that hold those grants, there should be interest.
We need to stop paying out interest on.
No, we're not, but that's income, that's revenue. So, I mean, I don't see a problem with just moving that to the general fund, but I'm just explaining that's why it's there. Because that was supposed to be the money earned on that. I don't see a problem moving it.
And our goal is
Our goal is-
be within the next 3 to 4 years, because it takes, if the cycle will
Mhm.
out, this will be closed down, is our goal. So, well, we were having a hard time trying to figure out, we had to call back to Judy, we had to reach out to Arlene, we had to reach out to Justin, trying to figure out what some of this money was, because it just was under a line of like ODOT grants. We couldn't, it took us forever to figure out what ODOT grants those were supposed to apply to.
Bridge to nowhere.
Yeah.
Sorry, never mind, doesn't do any good.
That's
Rod's
the
not here.
Podium Trust.
Yes, that's true. Great.
So,
Yeah.
Oh, that
Um,
money's still there. You can't move it.
It is sitting there,
Still sitting.
yes.
Still sitting there.
What did you find out the ODOT grants were?
That was our safe routes to school, which they had budgeted, that's where we were, so if you look over here, they budgeted 388,000 for. We're like, why don't, we didn't get the grant, but they budgeted like we did get the grant, and what we got of that grant was about 80,000 to do a bunch of signs and stuff, so that's why we,
But we thought last year we were gonna get a larger amount
Yeah.
apparently.
and we did.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I prefer to not, I don't want to budget for a grant unless we have been awarded the grant.
So do we think we're gonna be awarded another this year, or is that just the amount that we have sitting there?
That should be the amount that we have for the signs and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then, yeah, if you look back, the 2020, not the 2023 actuals, we had actually transferred from our general fund $325,000 into the grant fund. So we transferred 300 back. We're trying to, so we had quite a large beginning balance and
And
we're
when we
trying to
Talk
roll some of that back
Judy about that, it was, she believed that was transferred in for match.
with the
funds.
intent for matching funds. Yeah. And it wasn't being expended. We had quite a large beginning balance, almost a half.
It might have been a matching grant for the ODOT one.
And again, we can get it. So-
Yeah,
So we're just moving that back to the general fund where it came from.
Now what we're moving to, as she explained, the grants will be tracked within their own department. So they'll have a grants line item in their revenue. If they get a grant, it'll go into their department revenue, and then they will track that grant through their own expense through a grants line item, and they'll track their grants that way.
So every time we receive a grant now for any department in the general fund, there is in the revenue lines, there is a grants revenue line item. So that's where that money will go. And then each department who receives a grant, so this is fire, for example, they have already been awarded a $35,000 grant. So we budgeted for that for this upcoming fiscal year. So that's why that is in fire, and library already has a couple as well. So they have a line item for grants and they have the money that they've been awarded for the upcoming year. And then every time throughout the year when a new grant is awarded, we can just bring it to council and then do the budget adjustment and put it into their department.
so we have it in an expense category here,
Yes.
which is fine. So are we thinking we're gonna pay out grants to somebody? Or is we just sharing, I mean,
No, that's where they expend from, when they spend the money you receive.
They'll spend it out of the grants line item because
oh, okay, but you have grants as an expense item. So,
Yeah, the revenue is in the revenue line for the general fund.
okay, but it's the under materials and services, you have a grants line item, which is an expense line item. That's why I'm asking, are we paying out grants? Because that looks like we're paying out grants.
Well, that's how they spend.
That's how we spend the funds that we receive.
So you
for
want it
example-
called
you want to
something
call
else.
something else.
Yeah.
is what we're thinking.
So-
So it's more explanatory.
Well, no, that's not necessarily what I'm saying.
Depends on what you use the grants for. If you use the grants on equipment maintenance.
Then it should be listed under
that
equipment
would pop
maintenance.
into Equipment
Well,
maintenance.
the whole idea is to not move the equipment maintenance line. It's so that the department heads can also track their grant expenditures. It was getting very convoluted for them to track what they were spending in their regular line items and then what was their grant funds. So we separated that on purpose
Okay.
so that they can track that. So Harrison, for example, in the library, he receives grants all of the times, and previously we had been adjusting the line item for youth programs, for adult programs, for all his various line items, and then they're trying to keep track of which grant is in which line, and it would get spent out of the wrong line, and then the numbers are all messed up. This just makes it clean for each department head to know where their grant money is available to spend from.
That's good. We used to call it special purchases when we expended it. When we expensed it, we put it under special purchases, and then the grants had their income line. So I see what you're doing. You're showing, here's the income and here's where it's gonna go out. Maybe we could call it grants expenditures or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who's ever gonna be bothered by that. I'm not bothered that much though.
I'm open to suggestions.
Sometimes they have to spend it on specific items.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and
That's up to them to keep track of, yeah, because grants are, it will be specified what the grant is for.
So sometimes they're
That's for
not.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So next
sometimes they're
year,
not,
if
sometimes
if
they
you
are.
match 20,000, the 15,000 will be shown where it was allocated to what.
Sorry.
Next year, if I'm understanding this, if the grants, you have $35,000 to spend on grants.
Yes.
Okay, within
For
the
fire
fire.
department, yes.
So if they spend $15,000, then we will see where that $15,000 is, and then it will be $20,000 line next
Yes,
year.
yes.
No, it won't.
Well, no, not on that grant. That grant, actually, if they don't spend it, we have to give the money back.
It's-
'Cause
Because the idea is to try and spend that grant
Yeah.
this year.
And there's always, they have like, there's always a date it has to be expended. They have to complete something or spend it by a certain, there's
Yeah.
criteria, there's
All
rules for every
right.
single grant.
Yeah, usually
it's
it's
all
all
right.
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
On
Yes,
that,
there's like-
so
Yeah.
the other part of that is our department heads will be keeping a spreadsheet of their grants on the backside. So if you ever want to know, so that's how they'll track their grant. They got 35,000, they'll have a spreadsheet. And then they'll be able to watch that, but they know it's in this line item, and that's what they'll be doing. So, and then if there's ever a breakdown, we can reach out to police department and say, show me how you spent this grant, and he'll be able to provide a spreadsheet that says, here was the 10,000 I got, and I spent it on DUI overtime all the way down, and how he spent it. So
And that helps us as well in finance. Occasionally an invoice may come through and it coded wrong to the wrong line item. And then we can identify, oops, that got paid out of a different budget line. It should have been a grant expenditure, and then we can make that correction.
I do really, really like how you are having that grant line for each department, because they all work so hard individually to get these grants for their departments.
agree.
Yes.
And it really reflects on the hard work they're doing. And I think it's really good to be able to see that in the budget, see that Public Works, wow, he's busted his butt this year and he's got us this, this and this. And, because that's not a given.
It's not. It's not, and I mean, they might work really hard and write these great grant proposals and still take the cut.
The spreadsheet that they're using, that's new.
They all have their own way of tracking. Whoever applies for the grant is required to track and do all the reporting.
I'd like to note that Mayor Cross just arrived.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Cross.
We did it twice.
They are.
I've got a weird question that might be a little bit tangential, but
You're gonna have to define what that word means.
so coming from the nonprofit sector, obviously grants are a huge part of the work I've done. We often would receive grants that funded personnel. So to get a little bit kind of down to some technical details, let's say for the fire department, a grant was received to provide funding for a position or to subsidize the cost of funding a position. Two kind of questions come from that. One, would that money end up appearing under the personnel, or would it stay under grants? That's one. And two, this is where it gets a bit tangential. When I look at our conversation earlier about the FTE and staying below 50, if there is grant-funded personnel expansion, does that influence our FTE?
No, it does not.
What do you mean it doesn't?
We would not hire them on as an employee.
Contract.
We would contract them.
as a 1099,
Yes.
Got it.
or not a
Or through,
1099.
or through BDSI, whatever's appropriate for the situation, but we don't want to bring them on as full-on employees. That's not.
And to answer your question, that $35,000 grant is just that. It's for funding firefighters to be on call during the wildfire season. So they get paid to be ready to go. And so that's what that is. When they get paid, they will be paid out of that line item. And then they get a 1099 on that at the end of any funds they need.
And to the specific background is I worked for a nonprofit that was 10, 11 people. Typically, we had to hire fire, we had to hire 3.5 FTE to take on a large government contract for 2 years. We had to increase by 3 staff for, I want to say, a 2-year period or something like that. So naturally, that affects our company size significantly. But I was just curious how that affects, say.
I think that was a great question.
And our way around it is also if we are required to bring on staff is we then go through like BBSI and the money comes to us and then we pay BBSI and the contract through them to hire the employee. So it's not our employee, it's theirs, but they work for us. So that's how we get around it so that we don't increase our FTE.
So those grants, the $35,000 was for wildland firefighters. Why do we not see the wildland firefighter and the overland wildland firefighter lines adding up to 35,000?
The wildland firefighters is that's money that's put away for conflag. So if we get called up for conflagration, we have a line item there to help with that. Which is different than this grant.
So if we get called up for a wildland conflagration, that can be anywhere in the state and even out of the state.
Okay.
And that's why we have to have that separate line item for that. Because we'll get reimbursed to that line item from the agency that we are called up to.
But it's not necessarily a grant. It's just a reimbursement through the state fire marshal's office.
So that's why those are being kept separate.
Yeah, those are totally
That
separate.
makes sense then. Okay.
I know, I had to ask that question the first time too.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, no,
I thought wildland firefighter was,
a wildland firefighter was a wildland.
right? Yeah, you know, and.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, okay.
Next slide, please. Okay, Urban Renewal Agency, we're just going over just some of the highlights, some things to point out.
That's what Lisa told me.
Okay. Up in revenue, we have the URA receives its own taxes because it's its own entity. So the current taxes are the tax estimated collections for the Urban Renewal Agency for the fiscal year. And then it also receives its own SIP allocation. So that refunds and miscellaneous is the URA's SIP funds. Not a whole lot changed as we kind of looked at that earlier. We did transfer 300,000 out to the public safety remodel to help get that first phase completed. The 35,000 again is to the city. That's part of the intergovernmental agreement that we have in place to refund the city for the administrative costs of us administering it. We do all of the accounting, all of the work on it. So that's just to refund us our cost. And then we have our business loan program. The only real difference from last year is we have more of a beginning balance. So we have a little over 200,000 there for public improvements available.
Question. Where it, so the Urban Renewal Agency money is being used to help with the pool project and that been going on. Would any expenses related to that come out of this, and where would they come out if they were?
Not on this.
Not on this budget. We're not anticipating
No.
any on this budget.
This budget.
Okay, okay, that answered it. Thank you.
Next year's budget.
Yeah. Public safety building. This is its own remodel fund. We had a beginning balance of 369,000. We did transfer 60,000, as you saw earlier, from the city council strategic fund to help fund this, and then 300,000 from the URA. That leaves us, I highlighted here, with 729,000 budgeted next year to finish our first phase of construction. Next one to note, library reserve, that one was another kind of funky reserve. There's books and materials budgeted both in the regular general fund under library and then for some reason also in the library reserve. And it was getting confused where it was being spent out of, so we're trying to just kind of roll that back together. They also really don't need their own equipment reserve because we have a reserve fund with equipment reserves for every department. So it was another redundancy. Trying to clean that up a little bit. So we did go ahead and transfer 11,949 back to the general fund. And then 4231 to the general reserve, and that was for their equipment. It's just moving it into
Into a line item for the library.
for the library.
So question, why did we not just transfer it all to general reserve? What's the thought behind transferring it to the general?
Some of that, it went back into their budget for their books and materials and things.
Okay, so we're just, instead of having, because it was being expensed out of here, which like you said was
Yeah.
redundant. So that makes sense. So you're actually, you're just putting it back in the library
Yeah, we
general
just
fund.
moved that back into their regular department budget, so it's all in one place to spend from. Yeah, and then the other went into their equipment line item.
Great.
So. Yeah, trying to clean some of these extras up. Again, we have some we're trying to clean up that we just really don't need. And then next slide. We have some of these hangers on that you'll see. I just wanted to point one of these out. You know, we've got a couple where this is the last year. We have to show this, so we're this close to having those gone. We're required by law to show the 3-year history. So as long as there's history there, we have to maintain that.
Has to stay there.
Yes. Okay, now sewer, yeah, as Doug kind of mentioned, we're gonna shift gears a little bit. We have a couple of our funds, they're looking a little low, wanna go over some of this. So first one I've got here is sewer. We had a pretty low beginning fund balance. We were only left to start the next fiscal year with, this is an estimate of $136,504. That's quite a bit lower than last year, and as you can see, it's been trending down. The 2022-23 beginning balance was over 600,000. Last year, we were at 5, now we're down to 136, so that is going down, down, down. The other line I've highlighted, sewer charges and the revenues. This is based on a 3% off actuals from last year, just a rough number this is with a 3% increase, what we may anticipate collecting, which is, as you can see, pretty low compared to our history.
Why do we think it went down so much?
I don't know, we're looking into why there's a big.
Looking into it, it really dropped, and I don't.
300,000 and
Yeah.
nobody's not hooked up to the sewer.
Yeah,
Other than winter averages go down or those types of things, because of the winter averages, people are conserving more water. I don't know, but that could affect our sewer revenue.
Price goes up, people use less.
so yeah, we're seeing big drops.
Because, yeah, when you have not only our sewer revenue is also directly affected by water revenue. So if water revenue goes down, our sewer is gonna go down.
Yeah.
Has the water revenue decreased significantly?
It's decreasing.
It's decreasing also,
Cindy?
and I'll get into that one too.
Amanda,
So
we also just flip-flop
the fees.
the fees from the street light to the sewer, from the sewer to the street lighting it also.
Oh, that's right.
To bring that down also.
Because you guys moved that back
Yeah.
from sewer back into the streetlight fees.
Yeah, yeah, so we had.
Would it have made that much of a difference?
It was $5 that you guys moved back out of.
And 1,200 accounts times 12 months.
I still don't have a working street light by my house.
It's not perfect.
I bet it is.
So we're seeing an impact there.
Yeah.
So for sewer plant expenditures, and for those who are new, sewer is broken down into 2 pieces. We have the sewer plant and then we have sewer collections. So this part is the expenditures for sewer plant. Again, we have salaries with a slight increase, just accounting for COLAs and different things. Benefits, we actually we were really trying to cut costs to account for the reduced revenues and that low beginning balance. If you can see the previous, I know this is small, the previous fiscal year adopted material and services budget was 333,000. We were able to slice that down to is that 271?
271.
So, just looking at where we had room, where it was kind of budgeted high and it looked like it was safe to cut some of that down. Next slide, please. And then the second piece of the expenditures for the sewer fund is the sewer collection. Again, little increase in the personnel costs, but Same thing down in materials and services. I realize this is small, I apologize, but last year we had a little over 200,000 adopted and this year.
187.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out a lot of the reason too that our beginning balance is smaller on the sewer this year is look at the transfer to the sewer reserve and the amount of 504,000
There was.
was transferred. So that does affect your beginning balance for the next year. So that's part of the reason
Put it away.
when you were back on revenues, it showed the lower, that's part of the reason it showed the lower.
Yeah, that's
But we
probably.
want that money in reserves. We
It's
need,
supposed to
yeah.
happen.
We need it, yeah, so last year, and that is one thing you will see throughout the budget. There's been a lot of big transfers this year. We still were doing transfers, but there were some areas we weren't able to do very large. So. That's where we are with sewer. And then water, same thing, we're seeing a decline. If you look at the adopted budget, the beginning balance we started last year, we were at 667. This year we're at 447, so a dip there. Again, sale of water, it came in a bit low. And with a 3% assumed increase, putting us about 1.5.
Well, and since the other big issue is the fact that we're not always on with Sil Rock anymore.
Yes.
It's just when they need us. And so trying to estimate sale of water, shall we say, is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can we explain that a little bit more to the newer members of the committee here?
Okay, so up until the last 2 years, we have been the purveyor of water for Seal Rock. Okay, which has more connections than we do. So they have been a large portion of our sales side of water. We've known that they were going to get their own system at some point, and they have. Their first year was highly problematic, we'll just call it that, and so we still had good sales that year. Last year, they were up for most of the year. So that's one reason why our sales are way down. Another is just continuing conversation on our conservation on the part of our residents.
I think we did still leave the door open on sale. We did sell water to Seal Rock. They do quarterly, we do testing and we do charge them for the testing to exercise their valves because they're taking it about for about that 15 minutes of testing and opening and closing valves, and they run through about $300 to $400 worth.
It was around $400.
Yeah, every time, and they do that quarterly. So
we did leave about 1,000 to be safe.
but we're also, right now, we are their emergency backup. And so if they do take water, they're charged at the bulk rate of being out of town, which is 10 something per thousand. Is that correct? So they actually will be paying a lot higher rate than, but they're not paying maintenance fees. So they're just on an emergency basis. And that can also backflow into Newport to South Beach.
Now, is the reason we don't have anything under the line item 404-100 for the estimated actuals for the 2023-2024 because we combined it with the 403-700 line item? Was there just, I mean, you said that quarterly they were opening it, so there should have been $1,000 there maybe.
Well, since I've been here, I've invoiced them once.
They just started.
That 1,400 was included in the sale of water because.
That's what I was asking, I guess, is
Yeah.
where, because there would have been a little income there. If you've included it up there, then fine.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, we haven't heard that yet. And then again, water plant is water is in two pieces, just like sewer. So you have the water plant and then you have water distribution. So this expenditure budget is for water plant. Again, we had an increase in personnel costs accounted for the increase in health insurance, salaries, all of that. But we were able to reduce the material and services again. And still feel that there's plenty of room there, so that looks good. Same thing, just smaller transfers this year.
Can I shout out a kudos to our guys? I'm noticing in almost every one of these budgets, our adopted budget the year and the estimated actuals, you guys have come in much lower in almost every one of your departments. You watched your spending so closely. So like, we budgeted you guys 301,300. You guys spent 221,515. That speaks to the conservation of our department heads and just using, just being good stewards of the public money. And I think that's something that this budget is reflecting, and I think that they need to hear.
We're trying to be better.
Well, it's obvious. It's obvious. This is one of those things that kind of shows it.
And one thing to keep in mind, with this type of work, sometimes it's gonna vary year over year, depending on the type of work they're doing, whether it's regular expenditures or if it's more capital work. So you'll see more coming out of reserves in those cases, so.
But that hasn't always been a trend.
Yes, and I agree.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
On that sale of water to the citizens of Toledo, it's not broken out to where citizens inside the city limits and cities outside the city.
No, we don't differentiate that.
I know there's a different cost.
It is a different cost. It's 2 times the
You're
rate.
outside the
You're
No,
outside.
that's why I didn't see that in that budget.
I don't think.
He knows, I'm outside.
That's fine. I'll remember this from our summer.
Yeah, but I didn't know if everybody tracked.
Oh, mine means yes.
Maybe under the new system, there might be.
We would have to set it up as a system that way. It
Oh, you
depends
see
on
your
how it's
larger
coded. All
Yeah.
of it goes into the same bucket, so
Yeah.
to speak. So we would have to start separating that out in the billing.
Might, since we're not selling Seal Rock, it might be.
Well, you can only sell to people we're hooked up to.
Yeah, that's not really gonna vary.
We do have a one for haulable water or bulk water sales for the people that like haul out to Pioneer Loop or things like that. So
Yes.
unfortunately on that, our revenue is low there because our water price is high. And they're actually at this point in time cheaper to drive to Newport and fill their tank before they come out here. However,
Damn bills.
I will tell you that Newport has said they are raising their water rates 15% this year, so.
And hands down, our water tastes better, so.
No joke. Oh, sorry.
Way.
Right?
Those conversations are taking place.
And then the second piece of the water expenditures, this is the water distribution. So same thing, a little increase in personnel costs, but again, and this one was a little closer, but we were able to budget less than what we budgeted last year for materials and services. It's great. Still some transfers to the reserves and a little in contingency there. Water's coming out a lot better than sewer. Still a small decline, but not as bad as sewer. That was the last one to really had any talking points.
You're looking at me. It's almost 8 o'clock. I'm assuming that this is a good place to stop.
Well, we have one more thing we need to do.
What do we need to do? I'm
Is there
sorry.
any public, and if there anyone in the public that would like to comment on what we've covered so far tonight?
No, it's been great.
It's been great.
Now you're good to go.
I think we're ready to adjourn. What do we do?
Yeah, well, I think we were gonna ask how the committee wanted to proceed.
How do we want to proceed?
If they're wanting to go sit and meld on this, or if they want to start into it, that's.
See, that's,
And we have that.
I apologize for not being here
No, it's
because
fine.
I'm sorry, I worked under the assumption of every other time I've been to one of these. The first night has been, hello, here you go.
Yeah.
Here's your document to look at for a week. You
Yeah.
read us the budget message and we're out of here in 15-20 minutes. So going to my other meeting in the valley, I thought was, I can do that. Until Lisa texts me and goes, hey, we're still going. Say what? So I drove in, I sat down, I'll be blunt. I popped something, I read Lisa's message. Put my coat back on and got back in the car and got up here. So
Well, we appreciate you doing that.
you're changing my paradigms.
But, you know, just keeping you on your toes.
So I will say that as to your comments, we can easily add that supplemental data to the back and that can be added to it if, especially if the committee wants that added, it can be added, no problem.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's readily, easily available. It can be there and it can be a supplement or an appendix to, however, we can add that to the budget message or to the total package of the budget, if you think that is what you guys prefer. So, however, we are gonna leave it for working purposes as how we have it, because it's simpler for our department heads, it's simpler for our
I like
finance
it.
department, and it works. It's less confusion of writing down a wrong line item, wrong accounting item or something like that. So it's gonna be a lot better for our tracking and hopefully reduce some of the errors that we have and help our department heads be able to track their stuff a little better. So that's why we chose to do that.
I think it makes it easier for us commoners.
Yeah.
That don't work with numbers all the time. But I also see the importance of having instant availability of the information of numbers for the people that do know what they're doing.
And we can have
So I
that,
like it both.
we can have that available by the 7th. We can have that put back in as a supplement.
I think just as a supplement, yeah.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I don't think it should really, I'm not seeing where I think it would
Do you-
really affect our reviewing the budget.
Sure.
I just think it's additional information.
And do you want that just on that personnel and benefits line item, or do you want that on everywhere that
No,
we put it together?
I think just, honestly, just on the personal and benefits on each, just.
Benefits and taxes.
Yes,
Benefits and taxes.
benefits, taxes and insurance.
Benefits, right?
No, I was bothered by calling it benefits, Rod. I kind of lost my.
I made the mistake of calling retirement and taxes and everything benefits. Yes.
But it is legally.
Sit down in the room.
Well, and yeah, we already.
You already got that. You don't need it from your kids.
Don't worry, she's already been informed. She agreed, we're good.
Well, we can get supplements behind those that will be there and available.
Yeah, I
That's,
think it'll be fairly simple. You already have the details, so we just plug it in.
We have it all. Yeah, the intent was never to do away with it. It's just trying to ease of reading and use.
I do know there are just certain members of the public that will.
Pitch a fit.
Yes.
Yes, I get you.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not from this community originally,
Yeah.
so I don't know. And she's new.
Well, it's- and it's so very, you know,
Yeah.
so, and you crazy.
Yeah.
Are we adjourned?
Yeah.
So we will meet back May 7th at 6 o'clock. Plan to end at 9 unless we get close to the end and we decide to go longer. And if we do not finish on May 7th, May 9th at 6 o'clock, will be hopefully when we can wrap it all up. And if that's all, if you guys have any questions, I imagine that you can go to Doug
Yes.
or Amanda before the next meeting, if that will help clarify anything. And with that, if no one has any questions.
Amanda's gonna add a transit room tax to our budget.
Well, Barry has got out of the mix for him.
We do have income.
Yes,
We're adjourned.